at them all lying there, each one more beautiful than the next. I'll tell you what I'd do, sir, if I was you. Usually, the place of honor in an event like this is right in the middle, so just grab that middle one and we'll be done with it.
Shadows have always appealed to me. I remember being really small and falling asleep in the woods and waking up under a leaf and looking up and seeing the shadow of a bug on the leaf and just watching it for hours. And then I would always be taking photographs of shadows. So by the time I actually ran into this theater form using shadow, I didn't even realize it, but I'd been kind of prepped for it and looking for it and ready for it all my life. There have been a number of really strong influences in my life. One of them has been theater. Another is language. And everything that I've done has combined those two things. When I was in my early 20s, I wanted to learn a language that wasn't a Western language. And I wanted to live in a village. So as I began telling people, they said, oh, you should go to Bali. I ended up in Bali, and it was a really, really deep, wonderful experience and the beginning of relationships with people there that I studied with and worked with and performed with that have lasted more than 30 years. I was staying in this small village. There was no road to get there at the time. And it was a village full of painters painting these amazing scenes of mythology. And all of a sudden, everybody would jump up and go somewhere, and I'd follow them. We had to walk through rice paddies, and then we're in this primordial world of shadow theater that I had no idea about. I didn't even know it existed before, and it completely astounded me. It was the most amazing experience I'd ever had. It was the primordial movie. I could imagine the cave paintings coming to life just exactly as these shadows with the flame as the illumination. Here was this guy sitting behind a cotton screen with a flame right in front of his face, reaching around the flame and doing all the voices for 20 or 30 characters with an orchestra playing behind him and cueing the orchestra through all sorts of mysterious ways. And the characters were the same characters that these painters were painting. Teeth and fangs and big eyes and, you know, very refined people, very coarse people. What I really liked about this was you had to play every type. You had to be everybody. You had to be the bad guy, the good guy, the funny guy, the sad guy, the woman, all of that. I was at this school in the U.S. studying Balinese music and dance. And a Balinese dalang came to teach one summer. This was Nyoman Sumandhi. I said, listen, Pak Sumandhi, I want to really learn this, really somehow, you know, deeply, and I don't know what to do. And he told me, he said, well, that he was studying at the moment at a university in the U.S. Why didn't I go to his house, stay in his room, and study with his father, who was a dalang? Which is exactly what I did. Next thing you know, I was in this village in Bali that had no electricity. Pak Rajeg was my teacher, and this man became really a second father to me, a spiritual father. He's a very, very interesting thinker on his own. So I spent the next year and a half spending every night going off to performances with him, and then in the daytime learning music, learning language. I really felt that I had walked into a timeless world. Traditionally in Bali, you only become a shadow master if your father was a shadow master. It's something that's passed down through the family. You usually start when you're 7 or 8 years old. You learn it at home. I was already probably 25. I was first there for close to a year, probably, and then went back subsequently for 6 months, 3 months, often bringing my wife and kids along, which was not always the best idea because I was so focused on this opportunity to learn that I probably wasn't the best husband or father during those times. I had to memorize the language from the sound of it. I had to learn a new musical scale and be able to sing these things. I wasn't quite sure what they meant, and I kept coming back and asking, and every week or every month, my understanding improved a little bit. But I was learning 3 languages at once there in order to do this. There was one spring that we would go to, and they said, this is where all the generations of our family have come to practice their vocals for shadow theater. And it's a place where, with a certain volume and a certain kind of projection, the sound comes back to you. And then there's a little water spout that comes out that you can practice pushing your voice against so that you develop this power. So I really had a traditional education in so many ways with this. Years later, people said, well, we really miss you going into the rice fields and practicing. We really liked hearing that. It was embarrassing to realize because I know that my singing was awful. The Balinese believe that there are 2 parts of the world, the visible world and the invisible world, and that the shadow is in between the 2 and serves as a kind of conduit between them. And the invisible world is the world of spirit, and the visible world is the material world. In the symbolism of the shadow play, the screen is the sky, the lamp is the sun, the banana log that the puppets all stick into is the earth, and the dalang is God. So it's a big responsibility, actually, to be a dalang. The stories that are most popular are Ramayana and Mahabharata stories, which came from India originally. But there's a lot of evidence suggesting that the form was there before the content. The real origin was something shamanic. Some way of communicating between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And the world of the dead also includes the past. So by bringing this past to life with something like the Mahabharata, which is this expansive story about 2 families, both have kind of legitimate claims to the throne, but the core of the mythology is their struggle and the enlisting of other forces. They'll go for demonic forces of one sort or another and enlist these demons. They think that of the Mahabharata, for example, as a tree. And the tree has all the main stories incorporated in the trunk. But those stories are really well known to audiences in Bali. So the dalangs have to invent new stories. And the first time they'll perform a story, they'll call it a leaf. And if they performed it many times, it becomes a twig or a branch. And so this tree keeps growing and adding stories, and more things keep happening within the tradition. And the plays themselves are also improvised. So there's this whole reinvention of this ancient art that happens every time it's performed, which I think is really exciting. It's like jazz, in a way. A really experienced dalang will take one line from, say, a trunk story and develop it into his own version of a story, using all the same characters, but focusing on some aspect of the main character's personality that's interesting to him, or that represents something going on in the village where he's performing that he wants to make some comment on. Maybe people are famous for arguing all the time, or maybe there's somebody who's really greedy or something like that, and he'll weave that into the story. so that the villagers know that they're being talked to directly through this mythology. They're never going to name names. They're going to use the characters from the mythology to critique things and set an example of one sort or another. Some parts of it will be for older people. Some parts of it will be slapstick humor for kids. Having the kids in the audience means that they'll laugh like mad and give the older people a chance to laugh as well. Then there'll be some sort of romantic part, because the dalang knows that around the edges of the performance, the boys and the girls are all flirting, so he's like talking to them over there. Huck Rajeg said, it's like putting a whole bunch of shoes out, and people will put their own feet into it. So they'll get the message, but you don't force it on them. No ceremony is complete in Bali without either a shadow play or a mask performance. They can be part of a wedding. They can be part of a funeral, which is really an important part, because some of the stories talk about where the soul goes and how to help the soul get where it needs to go and stuff like that.
Arjuna, get away from that girl. Can't you see she's...
That also can be pure entertainment, and a lot of times people will have some sort of celebration. What I was interested in was focusing on the performance part of being a dalang rather than on the religious part, which is also a very important function of shadow theater. This is the Tree of Life, the Kayon. This is one of the key puppets in the Balinese cosmology. It does everything. This is like the opening curtain. It opens and closes the show. It changes the scene going from one place to the next. It indicates different stages of creation. This is the mountain, the wind, the rain, the water, the curtain that divides the acts. This is the halo behind a saint or a god. A lot of people ask me, why are these puppets painted when all you can see is their shadow? And there's actually two answers to that. One is that making them is kind of an act of reverence in itself, and it completes them to put the color on. And the other is that with 200 puppets in the dark lying around you, you need to be able to identify each one really quickly. Sometimes all you can see is the toe. And then the third one is that by looking at the puppet, you can get inspired by it. And if it's really beautifully put together, beautifully carved, beautifully painted, it's a help to the dalang to bring that character to life. This is Arjuna. He is one of the really main character's favorite. He's kind of almost a Don Juan figure, except he doesn't chase after the girls, they chase after him. And he's an excellent archer, all the different sort of martial arts skills, dancing, everything like that. And he's very refined, and you can see that he's refined by this eye that's very narrow. And you can see that he's a warrior by this headdress. And also in dance, a refined character will have their feet close together and use very controlled movements and very controlled speech. So his speech is high and extenuated. It's like, his brother is Bhima. You can see that Bhima has big eyes, a very wide stance. He actually has these famous thumbnails that are weapons. And he has a snake around his neck. He's a very, very powerful and impetuous character. Often he comes like just... Are you not that man? This is a princess The brothers won her in a marriage contest and came home and they told her mother, their mother, look, Mom, look what we just got brought home. And she said, make sure you share among all of you. So she had to marry all 5 brothers.
Drupada finally understood the value of all those 5 husbands for his daughter. Yeah, and I'm sure it's not slipping past her either.
There are servants and clowns that follow the main characters around and translate for them to the language of the audience. This is a father and son, Twalen and Murdah. Twalen's, son, we better go see what's going on over there.
All right, Dad, come on, let's go.
And they go running off. Yeah, charaku tawale ninganiku. My lord, sir, anything I can do to help you, I'm ready to do it now and forever. Just let me know what I can do. As an apprentice dalang, after 6 months of study, you're asked to do a performance in the temple. And the temple was next door to my teacher's house. And he didn't come to the show. And I didn't know what to think about that. And later on, I asked him why he didn't come to the show. And he said, well, you know, if your best friend falls down, you really want to go pick him up and help him. And you can't. And so I would have wanted to have done that for you, and I couldn't. So I listened to it, but I didn't go there. I thought something that was missing from Western theater, this whole involvement with mythology and bringing the past to life through shadows. I thought that I could be the bridge to bring this kind of theater to the West. But I was totally unsuccessful in explaining the context. So I decided to do a documentary about the family that I was studying with.
My father's a shadow master. He says you have to be a priest, a teacher, and a comedian, all rolled into one. We always try to guess which of the little kids will have what it takes.
We used the story of 2 brothers. One was the boy who was trying to learn to be a dalang, and the other was the boy who was much more interested in girls and cars and actually motorcycles at that time and stuff like that.
The boy next door was my father's apprentice, Kade. I keep thinking about him now. He was quiet and a little scared of my father, but he really wanted to be the shadow master for his generation.
I came to the conclusion that it would be better to do a collaborative piece with them than a strict regular documentary. So it ended up being this film called Shadow Master, which featured Pak Rajeg teaching a boy. Basically, the story of Shadow Master is my story as an apprentice dalang. And it's also his story.
I can't make jokes. You have to try. That's the one thing I can't help you with. I can show you how to move the puppets, how to speak, sing, build a scene. But you have to find your own sense of humor. Isn't that right? Absolutely. You can't tell someone else's jokes. It doesn't work. Now let's try it again. Here we go.
I enlisted Sumandhi as my main collaborator and kind of field producer on this show. His sister was around, so I pulled her in, and she was the romantic interest. And then the kid who was also studying Wayang became infatuated with her.
Well, since you're going, take this ring with you. I couldn't take that. My parents. It's nothing serious. It's too big. Try it here.
The reason I thought it was important to do a collaborative story with them is that I felt like I could get closer to the truth by having them enact this love story rather than me poking in on a real love story with my camera and being invasive in some way. So people were drawing on their own life experiences and bringing it into the film in a way that I felt would never have happened if we had been just a strict documentary crew. My goal in making the movie was to let